Hello, everyone. Juxtaposition here. Hope you're enjoying today, along with your Juxtaposition 1 coffee mug. If you don't already have one, check the link below to see how you can send some money to my P.O. box and obtain one of these Juxtaposition 1 mugs. All right. Today's video will be a World War II history lesson, but we're going to start out in a prologue prequel to the real story. And we're going to name today's video, Behold, the Pulgas Water Temple, which is part of the Crystal Springs Reservoir in San Mateo County, right? On Canada Road near Woodside, California. Right. Crystal Springs Reservoir. That's home to Patty Hearst. That's home to Abigail Folger, to her father Peter Folger's massive mansion estate property is in close proximity, walking distance from the Crystal Springs Reservoir and the Pulgas Water Temple, as well as Charles Ng, United States Marine, even though he wasn't a U.S. citizen. He was a subject of the realm from Hong Kong, belonging to the British throne. Became a U.S. Marine by lying on his application form to turn into a serial killer of 25 missing people. He went to an all-boys academy school. I believe it was the Notre Dame Academy Catholic School, walking distance from the Pulgas Water Temple at Crystal Springs Reservoir. Patty Hearst went to the Upland Academy all-girls school, which is the companion piece to the Notre Dame school, again, walking distance from Crystal Springs Reservoir. All right, this is near Atherton, Portola Valley, Sand Hill Road, Stanford University. This is that zip code. In other words, it's the eye of the devil. It's the bullseye. And that's why I'm starting out today's video. It's basically Geneva, Switzerland, West Coast, California. And I wanted to emphasize with you that the reservoir called the Crystal Springs Reservoir is a modern marvel of engineering where we transport snowmelt from the high Sierras into Yosemite National Park and then into the Hetch Hetchy Reservoir and aqueduct systems and consolidate it with the San Joaquin River and some other rivers, and then put it into canals and tunnel systems to service Alameda County, uh, San Francisco County, San Mateo County, Santa Clara County. It's a marvel, and it drops water off along the way. It's a 167-mile journey to go from Yosemite National Park through all of the twists and turns to get it out to where Patricia Hearst went to school. Okay, it's no small feat. It's a system that transports snowmelt to the to a series of rivers known as, for example, the Chula Chulami Chulamini River and Stanislaus River, and through Stanislaus County into tunnel systems and pipeline, and eventually finding its way out to Woodside and San Mateo County. This is where Paul Pelosi killed his brother David, not far from this Pulgas water temple. He was up on Skyline Boulevard, which is a baseball throw away from the Crystal Springs Reservoir. My first point I want to make here is that this temple, this water temple, which is what water is essential to human consumption. That's why you hear this poppycock story about data centers requiring water. Data centers do not require water. Data centers do not require water. Data centers do not require water. But anyway, that's the narrative that they want to foist on you. It's sort of like climate change is a natural occurrence due to cows and chickens and greedy consumers. BS. It is not. It's a military operation. Anyway, what they want you to understand is that without water, there's no humanity. You have to have water for life. There can't be life without water. And so, if you have a dam or a reservoir or a canal system, rivers and streams, and hydroelectric power grids, and the Pulgas water temple. This is a sign and symbol of what a dam is. A dam is essentially a temple of God. In other words, it's the determinant of who lives and who dies. And the water in the reservoir determines who lives and who dies. So if you have the draining of your bathtub effect, then you have a temple that there are no parishioners, there are no temple worshipers who will go. And we have that problem today with the Hoover Dam and the Glen Canyon Dam, do we not, on the Colorado River, which doesn't have enough water for both dams and damn near doesn't have enough water for one dam. They have enough water for neither dam due to all the alfalfa growing. Dominantly, farming's consuming 70% of all the water. Not flushing your toilet, not drinking um, cocktails in Las Vegas. That's not the reason why the water is down. It's because of farming. Farming is overwhelmingly the number one demand. So you could curtail cattle ranching and curtail the growing of alfalfa because rice and alfalfa are water intensive farming crops. They take more than peaches or almonds or raisins or grapes or lettuce. You need enormous amounts of water to be an alfalfa or rice farmer. All right. Well, anyway, what I want you to start thinking of is things that control water, gateway systems to water delivery, um, which will provide raw water for for agriculture or for electric power in the case of you know um, hydroelectric generators. I'll provide pictures below. Um, think of that in terms of a temple. That would explain all the Masonic, satanic, and occult like signs and symbols present at the Boulder Dam, renamed the Hoover Dam after Herbert Hoover, who was one of the first graduates of Stanford University. He was in the first graduating class of Stanford University, which, by the way, is in walking distance from the Pulgas Water Temple. If you didn't know, Stanford University is on Sand Hill Road. Sand Hill Road is a couple of baseball throws away from Crystal Springs Reservoir and the Pony Corral for Abigail Folger and Portola Valley and Redwood City and Paul Pelosi's murder of his brother David. It was a manslaughter um, felony, flipping of his car when he was 16 years old, flipped a Cabriolet Porsche on Skyline Boulevard, killing his brother. But of course, because the Pelosi family is anointed as exempt under the law, under maritime law, they decided to blame brother David, age 19. His death was due to a neck brace, if you believe that. I don't even think he was wearing a neck brace. Anyway, 16-year-old Paul Pelosi was given a pass on reckless driving, flipping the Porsche at night, speeding on a Friday night in close proximity to the Pulgas Water Temple, where allegedly they flew past there on Canada Road before he flipped the car. And just a week ago, Paul Pelosi did it again. He did it again. It's 70 years later. He's 86 years old. He was 16. Then, just a week ago, he crashed his Maserati into a parked Lexus car in the town of Yountville in Napa Valley. And 4 years ago, he totaled a $270,000 Porsche Carrera high performance car in Oakville, which is only 1 mile away from where he stoved in his $300,000 Maserati. So you got Paul Pelosi's learned absolutely nothing in 70 years of car crashes. I'm sure he has more car wrecks than we know of. Anyway, the transportation of snowmelt all the way over to the San Francisco Bay to develop out the San Francisco Bay, which is dominantly a weapons research foundry. That's primarily what we do in the San Francisco Bay Area. I know we used to think of clam chowder and Dungeness crabs at the Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco, and we thought about the cable cars, and we think about the Campanile obelisk at UC Berkeley. We think about those things, but the reality is Silicon Valley is 100% military, always was, always will be. Um, Atherton has brought us Genentech, Sandhill Road, Kleiner Perkins, Sequoia Capital, KKR, Excel KKR, Breyer Capital, Jim Breyer, Dean Jacobson, George Roberts, Henry Kravitz. Um, who else we got? Doug Leone, Bob Valentine, Tom Perkins, Eugene Kleiner, Jerome Kohlberg, um, Ben Horowitz, Mark Andreessen, Lorene Jobs, Powell. Those money launderers, along with Eric Weinstein and Peter Thiel, they brought us Facebook, Control Labs, Meta, Google Search, 24/7 surveillance, Genentech, CRISPR Therapeutics, Caribou Life Sciences, Caribou Biosciences. They essentially brought us fake Nobel laureates such as Jennifer Doudna, a fraud who takes credit for creating something that existed 100 years before she was born in terms of gene editing, gene splicing, manipulation and damaging of human cellular structure, DNA, Frankenstein monster. I mean, the Frankenstein monster novel was written before Jennifer Doudna's parents were born, for crying out loud. But anyway, be that as it may, signs and symbols rule our world, not laws, and certainly not people. It's the signs and symbols that are in charge. And the controllers have appointed things such as the Hoover Dam or the Pulgas water temple at the Crystal Springs Reservoir. They've anointed those places as sacred temples for temple worship. Really want to pound that into your head. Now, you just have to know, people, you couldn't have had World War II unless you prepared for it. And you got to spend 15 years of planning minimum to build all the weapons and the airplanes and assemble the infantry, train them, feed them, purchase uniforms for all of the police, the SS, the secret police, the military police, all of the army men, all the air people, all the royal sailors, all the sea-going military people, right? So, in terms of Germany, they were coming out of World War One and the Treaty of Versailles, which created their insolvency and their ruin into a ghetto community. But of course, Switzerland came to the raid. Switzerland, and that would be Zurich and Basel and Geneva came to the rescue of Germany, and they brought in Adolf Hitler as part of a fascist organization that was called Neo-Socialism. The Nazi Party is called Neo-Socialism, but just like Benito Mussolini, it's fascist. Okay, just like Salvador Franco in Spain is fascist. There's only a few actual leaders who call themselves fascist. Franco and Mussolini. But every single pseudo Hunger Game leader is a fascist. That would make Donald Trump a fascist. That would make Ron DeSantis a fascist. That would make Gavin Newsom and Gordon Getty fascists, right? And that would make Nancy Pelosi a fascist. And Paul Pelosi, who wrecked his car near the Crystal Springs Reservoir, makes him a fascist too, right? All the bankers are fascist, 100%. You can't be a banker unless you're a fascist. And fascism means the industrial control of the means of production on the planet Earth. Control of all port facilities, all containers, all railroad tracks, all interstate highways, all dirt roads, all secondary roads, all rivers and streams, delivery systems of water, sewage treatments, the farms, the farmland, all connected up to the delivery of water and merchant exchange transportation, which is what airports and ports do. They transport. They can transport and immigrate people, immigration, child trafficking. They can do that. They can transport heroin, weapons, hand grenades, bombs, explosives, military equipment, jeeps, tanks, rockets, rocket-propelled grenades, Claymore landmines. It's all done on a transportation system of airports and ports, which are 100% controlled out of Geneva, Switzerland, 100%, using NATO, right? North Atlantic Treaty Association, which is United Nations. United Nations, Geneva Global Governance, GGG, Geneva Global Governance, run out of Geneva, home of the Knights Templar and the Knights Malta, the Red Cross, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the International Telecommunications Union, the who brings us hoax pandemics, and immigration, which brings us child trafficking, and farming and soil, and genetically modified foods, and genetically modified human beings, all decided in a conference room in Geneva, Geneva Global Governance. Okay, so I hope you're with me that signs and symbols rule the world. And if you have an obelisk near you, which I assure you, you do, obelisks are wherever the center of merchant exchange is. So it could be near a port authority or a banking center. In Paris, we have the Eiffel Tower. That's hard to miss, right? It's very tall. It's 1,200 feet tall. Eiffel Tower, everybody knows about that. It's obelisk, right? And in the shadow of that, you have Jacques de Molay's martyrdom right there in the River Seine. And he's a fascist, and he was from Geneva, Switzerland. And the Knights Templar, he was attributed being the founder of the Knights Templar in Geneva, Switzerland. And he was murdered or executed there in the shadow of where they eventually built the Eiffel Tower. And the Notre Dame Cathedral is in front of the execution scene for Jacques de Molay. And then we have the Place de Concorde, where Marie Antoinette was beheaded and her husband Louis XVI was beheaded. And then the beheader who ordered the beheading, Maximilien Robespierre, he was the last person to be beheaded, where they then constructed an obelisk known as the Place de Concorde, which in 10 days you'll see the Tour de France race past the obelisk at the Concorde, Place de Concorde, and then they'll have it's about 1 kilometer from that obelisk, from that execution guillotine site. It's about 1,000 yards to the finishing line in Paris on the cobblestones on the Champs-Élysées, and that will conclude the 113th edition of the Tour de France in about 10 days from now. They will be having a sprint within 60 seconds of passing the Place de Concorde obelisk. Got it? Good. All right. So when we had this 1929 Great Depression in the United States and banks were falling out of business and bankers were falling off of their office building ledges onto the concrete, allegedly, that we had bankers committing suicide because they lost everything in the stock market. So when that was going on in 1829, that thrust the overall economy and the Hunger Game known as the United States into a Great Depression. That's why they call it the Great Depression, because of the high unemployment. But of course, we had the same problem in Germany, and we had a similar problem in Japan. They also were suffering economic depressions during the 1930s. Yes. So what do? Well, we rebuild their armies and then have them invade other colonial Hunger Games and have Hunger Game battles. So it turns out that we rebuilt the military for Japan, and we rebuilt the military for Germany, and we rebuilt and armed the Italians, who were still recovering from a civil war to decide their family governed Hunger Game districts, to unify Italy under Benito Mussolini, to have a one united Italy using fascist leader Benito Mussolini and a strong military presence with a national police known as the Carabinieri. So we militarized Italy, we militarized Germany, we militarized Japan, and guess what? We militarized the United States of America. So we built, in the lead up to World War II, we built the Golden Gate Bridge, the San Francisco Oakland Bay Bridge. We built the Boulder Dam, which later was renamed the Hoover Dam. We built that, and we built the Hoover Dam in a very short period of time. Man, we banged it out pretty quick here. Let me just check on the. We built the Hoover Dam from 1931 until 1936, so a little bit more than 5 years. Um, there was no Glen Ellen Dam, there was no Lake Powell, but we invented for the first time Lake Mead. Lake Mead existed because the Boulder Dam was built, and the water that was behind the dam was named Lake Mead, and that was officially completed in 1936. Now, there's all sorts of Masonic signs and symbols and satanic angels and fallen angels all over. If you've ever visited the Hoover Dam and taken the guided tour like I have, and I've seen the hydroelectric generators, I believe they have 13 of them. 13 unity Monks Mason number of generators. I believe it's 13, yes. Well, whilst we were building that out, don't forget we built out the Tennessee Valley Authority, which is actually 9 dams. How do you like them apples, right? What do you think's more impressive? The Hoover Dam or the Tennessee Valley Authority that brought us the Wilson Dam, the Norris Dam, Browns Ferry Dam, Hatchie Dam, Tennessee Valley Dam, Floyd Dada Dam, Tennessee River Dam, and 2 other parts of the Tennessee River Dam, bringing us to a total of 9. And those dams were built between essentially 1935 to 1937. And it was brought to us and funded by Switzerland. But they want to tell you it was done under the 1933 um, Act to expand dam building. But the United States is insolvent, so they're not in a position to guarantee credit. Only Switzerland can guarantee credit for Germany, Japan, and China, communist China, and Italy, and Spain, and the clown show known as the United States, a total clown show. The United States is the biggest fraud of all because everybody pretends that it's authentic and real, and that just exaggerates the fact that we're just part of the Weimar Republic. That's all we are. We're a clown show of the Weimar Republic. All right, so what I wanted to tell you is that the Hoover Dam is actually a very small footprint of temple worship because the Hoover Dam, no offense, without a doubt, is no less important than the synagogue on Wilshire Boulevard at 3663 Wilshire Boulevard, the Holy Synagogue over there. And then it's not any less important than the Vatican City, which has an obelisk in St. Peter's Square. The Vatican city state is much like the Hoover Dam, which is a lot like the Tennessee Valley 9 dams, which is a lot like the Pulgas water temple in the Crystal Springs geyser in San Mateo, just south of San Francisco, 20 miles south of San Francisco. We have a water temple. A water temple! Right there for all the billionaires who got loans and financing from Sand Hill Road. All those banks report to Switzerland. Kleiner Perkins, Sequoia, Capital, KKR, Briar Capital, right? Founders Fund, you name it. I mean, there's literally 100 private banks. They all report to Switzerland, 100%. Not just BlackRock, just not Blackstone. They report to Switzerland too. They're owned by Switzerland, directly owned. They're directly owned by Switzerland. So it's not just Bank of America and Jamie Dimon at Chase and JP Morgan and Citigroup, who owns Franklin Bank, who in turn was owned by Vatican Bank and Banco Ambrosiani of Milan, Italy. All right. So anyway, what I wanted to tell you is that Germany was rebuilt. Now, how do they do this? Who do they give the checks to? Well, they have bankers who wire the money over to the industrialists, the people that own and control the defense contractors, known as military contractors. And so you know the names of the American contractors. I think you know the Rockefellers of Exxon Corporation or Standard Oil. Standard Oil is a military contractor. You know, the military uses 50% of all the oil processed in the world today. So if you're going to blame climate change on anybody, you blame it on the military because that's who's polluting a minimum of 50%. And I'm going to tell you the military is polluting 90% of the world when they throw this smart dust aluminum chalk out with the carbon footprint problem. Anyway, the oil companies, British Petroleum, Getty, right? JP Getty, Gordon Getty, John Getty, Andrew Getty, Ivy Love Getty, Getty Oil. They helped rebuild Germany. They helped rebuild Japan. They helped rebuild the United States. Getty Oil, John D. Rockefeller, Standard Oil, now called Exxon Corporation. Anyway, Lockheed, Boeing, Howard Hughes, Hughes Aircraft Company, right? Don't we have Hughes Aircraft? Yes, we did. Don't we have General Motors, Ford Motor Company, which goes by Opel in Germany? Yes, the Ford Motor Company and General Motors, they had ball bearing factories and Jeep manufacturers in Germany before World War II began. Before and during. Coca-Cola, they rolled out Fanta Cola to Germany. Coca-Cola did business in Germany before and during World War II. Before and during Adolf Hitler, we had Coca-Cola doing business in Germany, right? We have IBM, I've been moved. I think that stands for I've been moved. Um, all right. So then in Germany, we have the Krupp company that makes military vehicles, Krupp, Volkswagen, BMW, Audi, known as Auto Union, uh, Alder makes motorcycles, AEG makes electronics, AG Osterworks. Um, then we have BASF in the chemical business. They work in conjunction with IG, Farben, which makes the Cyclone B chemical, and others. And we have Hugo Boss. They make the uniforms for the SS, the Gestapo, secret police, the Hitler Youth, and the Wehrmacht uniforms, all made by Hugo Boss, right? In Germany. But don't forget, we have Switzerland right there on their border, and they have Sandoz Labs for LSD and other psychotropic drugs and amphetamines. That don't forget, Switzerland has military construction companies too, and they help rebuild Germany. Switzerland rebuilt Germany, Switzerland, and they helped bolster Benito Mussolini on the other border of the Dolomite Mountains in Italy, right? In Japan, we have these contractors should come to mind if you're familiar with Japan. I think we've all heard of them before. The Messerschmitt, remember the airplane that was so made so famous during the Pearl Harbor surprise sneak attack? Remember that farce? That was a farce. I was a surprise if you didn't know about it. Mitsubishi made that plane. Mitsubishi, I think, made the engine. Then we have Mitsui, they make ships and naval warships and supply ships. Then we have Sumitomo Corporation. They make industrial key suppliers for heavy machinery, artillery, industrial materials, kind of like Bechtel Construction Company and Brown and Root and Halliburton. You can't have a war unless you have bridge builders, roads builders, dam builders, water temple builders, right? You have to have water. We had Nippon Steel, Kawasaki Heavy Industrials. Besides motorcycles, they built ships. Kawasaki lets the good times roll. Kawasaki lets the good times roll. And boy, oh boy, did they have good times roll before we had the kamikaze pilot. And before we had Pearl Harbor, we had Kawasaki and Nippon Steel. All right. So in the United States, you got Union Carbide, you got Hughes Space and Communications, Hughes Aircraft, McDonnell Aircraft, Boeing, Lockheed, Northrop, General Dynamics. You have the Jet Propulsion Lab. We have Caltech. Those are all being given grants and funded when we were in the Great Depression and had no money. We had no money, and yet Boeing is building airplanes, and so's Lockheed, and so is the Skunk Works is being conceived and hasn't been built yet, but will be built in phase two. Before Pearl Harbor, the Skunk Works rolls out in Burbank, along with Lookout Mountain. Lookout Mountain is actually on Wonderland Avenue, which feeds into Lookout Mountain Road, where Abigail Folger lived. She lived on 2774 Woodstock Road. One house, one house off of Woodrow Wilson Drive, which if you take it all the way back to Laurel Canyon and cross over, you're on Lookout Mountain Road. Lookout Mountain Road is Woodrow Wilson Drive. It's the same street. It's where Harry Houdini lived, right on the corner there. He lived on the corner of Woodrow Wilson Drive and Laurel Canyon at Lookout Mountain Drive. Lookout Mountain Drive or Lookout Mountain Road, whichever. All right. That all was done when we were emerging from the Great Depression because we were in an economic boom of military contracting, along with building the Empire State Building in 13 months and building the Golden Gate Bridge, the San Francisco, Oakland Bay Bridge, building the Tennessee Valley Authority, building the Hoover Dam. Besides all of those works projects, we then moved to building out China Lake in the Mojave Desert, developing the Site 51 secret aerospace area for flying saucers, and beginning the using the Death Valley zone where we pretend like the military doesn't control it, but the military controls it, and building out Lenore Navy Air Station, Alameda Naval Air Station, developing Hamilton Air Base in Marin County, developing Skaggs Island in Sonoma County, building up the Henry Kaiser Steel Company and the Henry Kaiser Shipbuilding in Mare Island in Vallejo, and building out Travis Air Force Base, Beale Air Force Base, McClellan Air Force Base, Mather Air Force Base, um, Vandenberg Air Force Base expanded from Fort Cook. It was Fort Cook, and it turned into was an Army base converted into an Air Force base called Vandenberg. Then we had Nellis Air Force Base in Las Vegas on Las Vegas Boulevard, North Las Vegas Boulevard, and so on and so forth. So what I'm telling you is this was all happening simultaneously, concurrently. In other words, the Germany is like a phoenix rising from the ashes, and so is Japan, and so is America. They're all simultaneously, along with Italy, they're all getting ready to go kick ass and invade some imperial colonial area, right? Because that is the plan for Geneva Global Governance. They are all about imperialism, fascism, colonialism, and they use their fascist partners in the industrial contractors. Because as my youngest brother, an officer in the United States Marines, 2 tours of duty in Somalia, so eloquently wrote in a letter that he penned and mailed to the Stars and Stripes magazine, which they stupidly published. They actually published an unedited version of my brother's letter in 1996, whereupon my brother wrote, and I'm paraphrasing, the United States Marine Expeditionary Forces are some of the most well trained, intelligent, logistically brilliant units of military force. That stated, make no mistake, the U.S. Marines cannot invade a beach, secure a perimeter, lay concertina wire, set up porta potties, lay claymore landmines in a strategically arrowhead shaped and patterned position, or move pallets around with a forklift for water and supplies and ammo without the help of Brown and Root and Bechtel Corporation and other 24 military contractors that provide everything from meals ready to eat, MREs, to our dinner, lunch, and radio services, satellite radio services, all provided by corporations. All right, that triggered a phone call from the Commandant, United States Marines, to my brother, whereupon my brother received a threatening lecture from the Commandant. I believe the second phone call would have been to the publisher and editor of the Stars and Stripes for having actually printed the letter instead of censoring it like they should have. All right. Well, anyway, what I wanted to tell you is our military forces are all hiding behind Apple Computer, Facebook, Google. Those are all military contractors. All right. Just like Lockheed, Boeing, McDonnell Douglas, Boeing, Boeing, McDonnell Douglas merged with Boeing, parts of Bell Helicopter merged with Boeing, General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman, uh, Skunk Works, um, Union Carbide, chemical companies, the oil companies, BP Oil, Exxon, Standard Oil. Those are all part of the military complex. They get a minimum of 50% of their revenue from NATO military contracts. And you can extend that into Harvard University, Yale, and Princeton, along with Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and Tulane University in New Orleans, and UCLA, UC Berkeley, and of course Stanford University over there by the Pulgas Water Temple in, at Sand Hill Road, um, Santa Clara County, San Mateo County borderline. Sand Hill Road is the dividing point between San Mateo and Santa Clara County. It's right at Stanford University. You karate chop down Sand Hill Road, and you have a division there of counties. Like, which sheriff is supposed to investigate the murder? I don't know. It's his turn. I think that's why Stanford is right on the county line. So you just dump the body, 12 inches from the campus and put it on San Mateo County Sheriff's Department. All right. Anyway, long story boring is once, once Spain and Japan and Germany and Italy and the United States, once they were more or less fully um, resupplied with military hardware, you can pick your favorite date. We had the Japan officially invading China, which they refer to as the Second Sino-Japan War, because they'd had a false flag incident in 1931. But they had a second false flag incident on July 7th, 1937, where Japan launched an invasion of China, mainland China. And then, quick on the heels of that, we had the Germans invading Poland on September 1st, 1939, which is about 18 months later. And this kicks off the German invasion of Europe. Then, quick like a bunny rabbit, previously we had Italy invading Ethiopia on October 3rd, 1935. Not as big a splash. And by the way, it's not their first rodeo. They've been monkeying around with both Somalia and Ethiopia for decades. But anyway, officially October 3rd, 1935, we have Benito Mussolini invading Ethiopia, which I don't even think they have a military. Then we have Russia invading the Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, um, and also invading Manchuria in 1933. But in 1939 to 1940, before Pearl Harbor, Russia invaded the Baltic states of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. So you see, this is how we get a world war. We get the Chinese are involved, the Russians are involved, the African nations are involved, Spain, Italy, France will eventually get dragged into it, along with Britain or United Kingdom, Germany, America, United States, Canada, and then, of course, we have Japan and Southeast Asia, all being dragged into a world war, all operated out of Switzerland, which at that time, I don't think there were 2 million people who lived in Switzerland. The only thing they have going on is drugs, chemicals, and banking, right? They're in the banking business, and they're financing the invasion of Poland, the invasion of China, the Pearl Harbor sneak attack funded by Switzerland, the invasion of Ethiopia by Benito Mussolini, funded by Switzerland, the fight over fascism in Madrid, Spain, funded by Switzerland, gave rise to Lucio jelly donuts of Propaganda Due, and Italian fascism, and Buenos Aires, and South American fascist dictators, like Salvador Allende, Augusto Pinochet, Juan Perón, um, etc. It brings in Chile, um, and it brings in French Guiana, British Guiana, Portuguese Guiana, Brazil, Argentina, and El Salvador, San Salvador, Costa Rica, brings in Guatemala and Belize and Mexico. It's a world war, right? So I've told you what the names of some of the Japanese industrial companies were, from Kawasaki letting the good times roll to Volkswagen and BMW in Germany to General Motors and Ford operating all over the place in the world, making military weapons, vehicles, and cars and trucks. So if you look at it from a college of corporations point of view, you realize there's no nations because the World War is just about flags flying, right? It's a bunch of flags. But the reality is it's just a bunch of corporations making a profit, making chemicals and hand grenades and missiles and airplanes and ships, whether it's the Royal Navy. Don't forget we have Britain. They brought us Rolls-Royce and Leonardo and BAE and Viscos and Tiles. They have all these military contractors in England, and they are also working in conjunction with Hollywood to produce propaganda films, as well as working in conjunction with Lockheed and other aerodynamic companies to make airplanes and things that go boom in the night or day. All right, so today's video is to tell you essentially how the power of the pyramid works, that how the obelisk means fascism chain of command. It's a military chain of command, and um, and that the pyramids in Egypt, which I just made a video on that. That's 130 pyramids built over 450 years along the Nile River in Egypt, right? So that's a reset. They took money from nothing, which is Swiss bank credit, social credit, money from nothing, and then employ 100,000 people to build 130 pyramids over 4.5 centuries. Look what we did with World War II. We banged that thing together in, 10 years, certainly 15 at the outset. 10 years of prep, 5 years of World War II killing and fighting. That's amazing. And look at all the hardware that was destroyed, built and destroyed, built and broken, build and break. I mean, way more than the pyramids. I mean, the pyramids is nothing, but they didn't have a lot of technology when they built the pyramids. That was 1500 before Christ. That's 3,500 years ago. So today we're building out the smart cities, augmented humans, putting aluminum chalk and polymers into people and tagging them and tethering them to the cloud 24/7. That's more expensive than World War II. And this was trillions of dollars. Well, this is trillions of dollars. What's over your head? The polluted skies? So, what I'm saying is, this is nothing new. This is how Switzerland works. This is how the Knights Templar works. This is how colonialism and fascism and imperialism works. Just like Vietnam, just like Rwanda, just like the Congo, whether you want to call it Spanish conquistadors and conquering South America and Central America, flying the Red Cross flag, or whether you want to call it the English and Sir Francis Drake flying the Red Cross on his white canvas sail and coming out to California and sticking a flag down at Point Reyes, which today is a park, is a national park in Marin County. Whether it's building Skaggs Island, which is 13 miles behind my airplane here, 13 miles south of me is Skaggs Island, and whether it's Hamilton Air Base, which today turned into residential homes, but it was an air base for decades, and whether it's Mare Island and shipbuilding, or whether it's Liverpool, England, and shipbuilding, it matters not. It's all the same thing. It's Switzerland deploying military resources worldwide using bankers, private bankers, to wire the money over to make all this stuff happen. Whether they can want to build a pyramid or build the Hoover Dam, or later, 20 years later, building the Glen Canyon Dam and inventing Lake Powell, which both of those dams are going to go tilt within the next year, which is kind of a shame. The Colorado River used to run all the way out to the Pacific Ocean, but that stopped happening a long time ago. So first we built the Hoover Dam, and for 20 years that worked out fine. Then they had to build a second dam to service more people in the Arizona, Utah, New Mexico area. So now we're just using up all the water. And now we're going to roll out data centers where we claim that there's no energy. You don't need water for a data center. You just use refrigeration capability and freon gas. So you do need solar power or wind power or electrical power. And if you don't have any hydroelectrical power driven by water, then you can use solar power, or you can use the sun using the 6G terahertz smart dust that you got and lithium batteries, or you can use windmills and wind power, right? And or better yet, don't build the data center. The data center is just to a part of the mesh network to collect biometric data on all living creatures on the planet for the purpose of pacification and controlling them. And I'm not in favor of that. So, needless to say, Juxtaposition's position is that I am anti-data center. I'm anti-data center. I'm also anti-military. I want NATO disabled. NATO can exist in the form of a toothless German Shepherd and a 107-year-old security guard who has ADD, Alzheimer's, senile dementia. Take care. Do like and share my videos. See how to get one of these juxtaposition handsome coffee mugs. I am heavily shadow banned. Do send my videos to like-minded people. Take care. We'll talk soon. Bye now.